If I had to boil a CEO's job description down to a single sentence, I think it would be this: what do we work on next? Simple question, but with so many competing priorities, it can be hard to decide where to invest your precious energy and resources. Until, that is, you listen to this episode. Because when you do listen to the show, you will find it's actually not hard to decide what to do next when you have a clear process for planning. This is required listening for any high-growth entrepreneur. It will give you insight into exactly how I run my business and exactly how I help my clients grow their revenue, profit, and open time simply and effectively. Let's go. Hello, woman owner. So today we are breaking down the exact quarterly planning exercise I use in my own business to help us drive 30% quarterly growth, and that I recently used in one of my clients' businesses to help her drive 50% quarterly growth, which is huge. I have used this process to help our clients drive millions in new sales and revenue collectively, and have also used it, another example recently, to help another client increase her monthly revenue capacity by an additional $10,000, which is equated to about actually 20% of their month-over-month revenue. So what I'm trying to say is this is a tool that you can use to plan exactly what you're going to work on in your business in the next quarter. And it doesn't just make you feel good. It doesn't just reduce complexity and reduce overwhelm. When you apply it diligently and effectively, this tool is going to help you unlock increased amounts of revenue without feeling like you are working harder. In fact, when you implement this tool, you will feel that you are working less hard for the money you're earning. That's the beauty of it. Essentially, I'm going to walk you through the exercise, explain how to do it, and then I'll also share some of the places where everybody messes this up. So if that sounds good to you, keep listening. The idea here, so the exercise we're going to walk through is constraints mapping. Okay, I won't make you wait till the end of the episode. We're going to be talking about an exercise called constraints mapping, and it is one of the most powerful disciplines that any woman owner can develop and implement consistently inside her business. Constraints mapping. So a constraint is basically anything that inhibits growth. So you might think about if you have kids like I do. My boys are now 14 and 18, but when they were little, they were growing boys, and I felt like every 4 months I had to buy them a new pair of shoes because their feet were like straining inside the shoes that they had, and I had to buy them new shoes so that their feet would have room to keep growing to achieve their sort of natural state. So when you have things that block naturally occurring growth, that is called a constraint. And the key idea here, the key theory, and it's not just a theory, it's a principle, is that businesses do not rise to the level of their potential. They fall to the level of their constraints. I'm going to repeat that because it's so key. And even if you just got this one principle from this episode and this is all you got, it would be well worth your time. Business does not rise to the level of its potential. It shrinks to the level of its constraints. So just like with kids, you need to keep getting them new shoes so that their feet have room to grow. And if you don't get them new shoes, their feet are going to start to curl up inside those shoes, right? It's going to bind them. It's going to constrain their growth. Business is like that. So when you understand this concept, you start to see that for many of you guys, your growth is less about things that you do to drive it. Like, we definitely use that expression, but business isn't really about driving growth. It's more about releasing the things that block growth. Now, I knew this inherently and have known this inherently and have been kind of working this way, but I remember I asked Alex Hormozy actually this question. And I asked him, hey, how do you decide what to work on next in your business or in the businesses that you get through acquisition.com? And he's like, I look for the constraint. So I take a look at the business, I identify what's the biggest thing that's blocking growth right now, and that's what I work on. And I basically, to surmise or to sort of repeat what he said in my words, his process is essentially releasing one constraint after another. And that's how he decides what to work on next. And that's how he guides his teams to figure out what to work on next. And that was really helpful because, it's helpful when you have something that you're already doing and you get kind of back up around it, like, hey, yeah, exactly. So I thought that was kind of cool. So how do you do that? Well, enter the constraints mapping exercise. So here's the thing. When you start doing this, like I do constraints mapping, I'll be serious. Like I do constraints mapping with probably about 200 businesses a year. Like literally personally sit down with hundreds of women owners each year and do this exercise. And this is part and parcel, like if you've been listening to the show, you'll often hear us talk about growth audits, the growth audit. What is the growth audit? It's a constraints mapping exercise. So I don't understand, if you're a regular listener to the show and you haven't booked a growth audit, I don't understand what triggers you about growth and greatness. Just kidding. But that's what we do on these calls. So literally hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs a year. And then with some of those entrepreneurs, we actually work together to relieve those constraints. But because of that, it takes me literally, I can usually tell and pinpoint the rough area in under 5 minutes where the major constraint is. And then usually between minute 10 and 15, I can usually pinpoint with a huge degree of accuracy, specifically where that constraint is coming from. And then it's really about developing a plan that's going to work in the context of you, your business, your world, your personality, your team, your resources to identify, okay, how are we going to fix this constraint, right? But I've done so much of it. And so for you, you may never have done this, and you may not be like me where you're actively consulting with hundreds of businesses a year. So for that reason, you may only ever be mapping your own constraints, right? And so it might take you longer to be able to see where they are. So I thought that I would walk you through exactly how to do constraints mapping. And if you use this exact process every quarter, you are going to start to see pretty insane growth, right? And the key will be, can you discipline yourself and calm yourself down enough to allow yourself to grow by releasing constraints rather than trying to do 50,000 new things, okay? So to do this exercise, you're going to need a big piece of paper. You want a nice big piece of paper, and you need 4 markers. You need a black marker, you need a green marker, you need a red marker, and you need a yellow marker. Okay? So what you do is you spread out this piece of paper, and before you do anything, I want you to think about, bring to mind your customer journey. So a customer journey simply is the way a customer moves through your business from the time they first hear about you, typically through your marketing or a referral, right through to the point that they complete their work with you, give you a testimonial, and refer you more business. Okay? So that entire journey is called the customer journey. And what you're going to do is you're going to sit down, and before you start drawing it out, you're going to just kind of mentally move through how a customer moves through your business. So let's say that you market primarily by attending a networking event. So you would start attend networking event, gather business cards. Then you might, research, do some intel and background research on the people you've gathered cards from. You're going to do follow-up, and your target, the people who would be good customers, you're going to ask for a meeting. You're going to host a business development, a get-to-know-you meeting. Then you're going to see if there's any work there. If there is, you're going to see if you can put together a proposal, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the whole process. You're going to mentally go through this. And typically there's going to be kind of 4 or 5 different phases here. There's going to be sort of the marketing and lead generation side of it, the selling and closing the deal side of it, the onboarding side of it, the service delivery, and the offboarding. Okay. And for each of those pieces, marketing, selling, onboarding, service delivery, and offboarding, you're typically going to have anywhere from 3 to 5 to 6 steps in that customer journey. So you're just kind of sort of, think through what this looks like. And then you're going to take out that black marker and you're going to start drawing out the customer journey. Now, here's the thing. Do not make this into a list in a Google Doc. It has got to be visual. If you don't do this visually, the exercise does not work effectively. It's got to be visual. I have seen this. I've seen people try to make this into lists. They try to make it into a spreadsheet. It's really ineffective. So just why bother? Okay, so draw it out by hand. Be as detailed as you can, mapping every step of that process. And what I do is that for each of those steps of the process, like I draw a little box, and then underneath I put what that step is. And so each step, if you imagine at the end, you're going to have sort of like a line, this big line of boxes, and each box represents a step. So each box, you're going to write underneath that box what that step is. Okay. Even to do this, for many of you, even mapping the customer journey itself is going to be a big deal, and if you are scaling from 200K to 2 million plus, which is the real focus of this show, you must have a handle on your customer journey. Before that, it's kind of easy not to. A lot of this is happening in your head. But as you start to scale, you have to start to map the customer journey. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to outsource. It becomes very difficult to train and onboard. There's a ton of things that can happen and go badly when you don't do this well. So just even congratulations, you are way ahead of the majority of entrepreneurs because you have a clear customer journey map. So now you've got your map in front of you. You've used your black marker. You've got this nice big piece of paper and you've really plotted out how a customer moves through your business. So here's going to be the next mental exercise. So this is where you're going to imagine that your customer is this adorable goldfish. Okay, for some reason, the image of a goldfish, use whatever kind of fish you want, right? But imagine that it's this lovely, earnest fish, goldfish, and what it wants is to get better and transform according to the service that you provide, whatever that service is. And I want you to imagine that it's actually like your customer's a goldfish and it's swimming through, like your customer journey is this little stream, right? And what that goldfish wants more than anything is to be able to just swim effortlessly and easily through that stream, right? But that's often not how it goes. What often happens in any kind of business is that as you start to grow, you start to get constraints, you start to get bottlenecks. Certain aspects of this customer journey are easy and simple, and certain aspects are more complicated and harder, right? So now you imagine like this little goldfish swimming through, and you really look at that customer journey and you start to ask yourself, where does this goldfish start to run into problems? Like, where do things start to get complicated? Where do things start to slow down? Where are things easy and where are things effortful? So what starts to happen is now you're going to pull out your green marker and your red marker. So you start looking at this customer journey, and everywhere where it's like easy and working super well, there's lots of flow, just color that box green, box by box. If it's hard, really hard, mark it red. And if it's kind of so-so, just don't mark it yet, right? So you go through and it's like where stuff is really hard, you map that stuff red. And where it's easy and there's pretty good flow for right now, you mark it green. And anything that's in the middle, you're going to mark it, you guessed it, yellow. Okay. So at the end of this exercise, you take a look at this and you can see where you're going to have a mass of green and red and yellow. Okay. And some of you, I've done this and I've had like mostly red. Now when I look at it, there's a little bit of red, there's a little bit of yellow, but it's mostly green. But the thing is, even if you have mostly green, don't rest on your laurels because growth starts to create new constraints. So a big part of our role as CEO is just constantly identifying and releasing constraints. What happens is, so this is the exercise. This is how you decide what you're going to work on every quarter. You pick a red box and you fix it. And that is it. That's your growth strategy. Literally, I'm not being facetious. You go through and you start to see where in my customer flow, where in this customer journey does stuff start to slow down? Where is it bottlenecking? Because if your business starts to bottleneck, it cannot grow, right? You won't want to create growth. You'll stop doing the marketing you need. Your heart won't be in selling. You might tell yourself you're having all kinds of these inner mental blocks. No, you're not. You have a constraints issue. Solve that and see how quickly you start to want to grow again. Now, not that there aren't mental constraints. Like I remember actually a big constraint for me earlier in my career was improving. It was sort of in the service delivery side. And this was where it was all about getting feedback and improving products. And I was doing it all myself. I felt so overwhelmed a lot of the time, and I just never wanted to hear feedback. And you're always going to hear feedback if you're working with people, right? I didn't want to hear feedback. And so my constraint was not the fact that I took things so personally. And because I took things so personally, that became a constraint because I didn't want, the more people I had, the more opportunity there was for me to take things personally. Do you see what I'm saying? So sometimes the constraint can be inner. But the key is you got to be aware of what that constraint is, and constraints mapping will do this. So that's your quarterly growth plan, right? One quarter at a time, you start addressing one red box, one constraint in your business at a time. Normally, it's difficult to address more than one constraint a quarter. You might be able to do two. But remember, you're still running your business, right? So you have limited time to be able to work on the business. This is all about what can you actually implement. And I think this is a big thing. Like theory is one thing, but business growth happens in the real world. So theoretically, you might be able to address more than one thing. But when I see active businesses that are growing that have clients, I almost never see them capable of addressing more than one core thing at a time. So I'd be happy for you to prove me wrong. I just haven't really seen it yet. So I want to give you a very specific example of this. Onboarding. Okay. So I did a constraints mapping exercise, and what I saw was that onboarding, like it was red all through the onboarding process, which meant that as soon as customers came into our world, that the constraint hit immediately. And I was doing way too much of this process. I was holding way too much of it. And because I was doing it very competently, and because of the way that I was doing it, for many of us, we'll develop ways that are unique to us. It was difficult for my team to see how they could take it off my plate because we developed a culture of doing it in this specific way, which was very much reverse engineered from my particular strengths. But it was a huge constraint in the business. So I identified that the onboarding process was our chief bottleneck, and I delegated ownership of fixing that to the team, and then I got the fuck out of the way. Now, this is key. It made them so uncomfortable. I can remember mapping it out to them and just being like, you guys need to handle this. And also I gave them an aggressive timeline because I just knew. And it was really uncomfortable. And that's part of my job as a leader, part of your job. Like if you're not making your team uncomfortable sometimes, if you're not giving them stretch goals, then you're not giving them an opportunity to show you what they can do and to build new skills and everything else. But that's what I did. Okay. And I was basically clear, I'm not going to be involved in onboarding anymore. We're done here in this specific way that I had been involved. And you know what? They took it, they ran with it, they implemented it. So basically within 6 weeks, it was handled, and we were able to double our active client base and cut churn by 93% in 12 months. So churn is the number of customers you lose on a monthly basis as a percent of your total client base. And for service-based business, especially any company that does monthly recurring revenue, churn is a really important metric. Like we could do a whole thing on churn. We're not going to here, but it's a very important metric that you want to watch for growth and profitability. So it was huge. I mean, One of our clients recently did this exercise. And in fact, mapping constraints is a core thing that we're doing with our clients on a regular basis. So she did this. She identified where her number one constraint was, and that's the only thing she did. So she was thinking that where she needed to focus on, like when she came in to work with us, she was all gung ho. Hey, the place I need, marketing is my problem. The place I need to focus is marketing. But when we did a constraints mapping exercise, we identified that was not the place. Actually, that was not at all the constraint. It was in another place. And so we fixed the constraint. And in 90 days, she increased her revenues by 50% and her profits by 30%. That's in 1 quarter. Okay. It was not about marketing, my friends. Marketing wasn't even the thing. And so you can see how often many of you guys are thinking about growth as in marketing and adding, when really, when you focus on releasing constraints, that's where most of your growth is going to come from. But that's not sexy. People don't want to hear that because a lot of people don't understand timeless principles of business growth. That's why. But, whatever. So I'm just here to tell you this shit works. That's just, that's why I'm here. So let's talk about how people mess this up, okay? Yeah, just feeling a little cheeky today. I got to say it. So how do people mess this up? Number one is that they forget that scaling isn't usually about adding. Remember this client? She thought it was all about marketing. It was not. Scaling is often about subtracting, then multiplying in that order. And for many businesses, subtracting is about you subtract the constraint. You just get rid of the constraint. And once you do that, growth, it just frees up. That goldfish can swim through and it makes room for another goldfish and another goldfish and another goldfish. Like, it's really powerful. The other place that they mess up is they don't understand the concept of throughput. So throughput is a term usually used in manufacturing, and it's basically like how quickly can we move a product from raw materials to ship it out to our customer. Throughput. So the speed with which you do that really speaks to the efficiency and the income producing capacity of a manufacturing plant. But the same is true in a business. Throughput is one of the most important concepts. And so when I'm looking at customers and our clients' businesses and my own business, I'm always looking at this concept of throughput. I'm thinking about their customers like goldfish moving through the business. I'm thinking about where do they get stuck? Where are the hot points? How do we need to create more flow? The term is cash flow, and constraints slow down cash flow. Right? So throughput, you need to imagine, literally, I want you to imagine your business is like this stream and customers are like fish swimming through it. And can they swim through unencumbered and freely, or are there places where they get stuck? That's throughput. The other thing that happens all the time is that entrepreneurs will overestimate what they can get done in a quarter and underestimate what they can get done in a year. So what I will see is entrepreneurs all the time thinking that in their small, business with fewer than 10 team members, they can drive forward 3 to 5 major initiatives a quarter. And what I have seen is that that's generally not the case. Generally what they would be so much better off doing is driving forward 1 initiative per quarter, right? And then the other place that people really mess up is they don't actually have a good grasp on their customer journey. So my hope is that with this simple exercise of mapping your customer journey, it allows you to start identifying where your constraints are. So we call this constraints mapping, right? You write down your customer journey, but when a constraints mapping exercise, you do that not just for the sake of identifying the journey. You do it to pinpoint where are the constraints and therefore what do I need to fix next. And a lot of times in the coaching work we're doing, we are actively engaged hands-on with our clients on a quarter by quarter basis. Hey, where's the constraint? We map it, we identify it, we have discussions over it, and then we put together a focus plan to address it. Quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter. When you apply this principle, growth becomes a natural byproduct of releasing constraints, right? It increases flow. I hope you found this helpful. If you want to do a constraints mapping with me, I'd love to help you if I can. Book a growth audit, safimedia.co/growth audit. safimedia.co/growth audit. We'll have a quick check with you to make sure that I can actually help you. And then we'll sit down and do a constraints mapping exercise. It's really powerful. And again, it's going to take me under 15 minutes to identify specifically where your constraint is and therefore what we need to work on first in order to grow. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave us a review. Reviews are huge. I read every single one of them. I appreciate them so much. Reviews and subscription. Like if you subscribe the show on Apple Podcasts, hit follow on Spotify. Spotify won't let you leave a review, but Apple Podcasts will. Leave us a review. It's huge in terms of helping us reach more women like you. Have an awesome week. Can't wait to see you back here next week where we have a fantastic interview with Sigrun, a fantastic friend and colleague, about a 3-step client refinement exercise that helped her take her online launches from 400K a launch to 2 million a launch. You don't want to miss it. See you next week. Same bad time, same bad place. Bye, woman owner.